Okay, so today we will gonna start with API security. Okay, I'm gonna close that for a moment, and yeah, majority of the people might have already aware about the web application vulnerabilities. So our topic will be API security. Okay, before proceeding ahead with API security, let me give you a small brief that OWASP top 10, not top 10, but OWASP has already created a couple of categories regarding the OWASP security vulnerabilities, and they have released the list of 10 vulnerabilities in the year 2019 as well as in the year 2023. And these are the cases, I mean, not cases, these are the vulnerability list. These are the vulnerabilities which OWASP has categorized in 2019, which involves broken object level authorization, short form is BOLA, then broken user authentication, excessive data exposure, lack of resources and rate limiting, broken functional level authorization, mass assignment, security misconfigurations, injections. So this injections basically involves SQL as well as NoSQL and other type of injections as well, if at all we are able to identify them. But majority of the time we focus on SQL and NoSQL, and if we got a chance, then we can, yes, definitely search for SSTI, server side template injections, or if in rare case we could also try to identify the code execution vulnerabilities, code execution as in code injection. Okay, then later on, OWASP has added improper asset management, then insufficient logging and monitoring. This was the vulnerability category in the year 2019. Later on, OWASP again after 4 years created another new category in the year 2023. And if you look at the categories, as in the vulnerabilities which are mentioned in these top 10 categories, these 2023 categories are somewhat similar to the one which was earlier on released in 2019. So if you see broken object level authorization, this is again same broken object level authorization. Then we have broken authentication. Yes, this was also available and it was also released in 2019. Then later on we have broken object property level authorizations. So over here what OWASP did, OWASP combined the excessive data exposure as well as mass assignment vulnerability into one and name this combination of vulnerability as broken object property level authorization. Then later on again unrestricted resource consumption, broken functional level authorization, again similar to this. So yeah, this lack of resources and rate limiting, this vulnerability is somewhat similar to unrestricted resource consumption, or I should say this unrestricted resource consumption vulnerability is somewhat similar to rate limiting, but the only difference here is that the later version of OWASP, what they did over here, they have added a couple of more misconfigurations along with brute force attack and rate limiting. Okay, then later on we have unrestricted access to sensitive business laws. This is the new one. SSRF again newly added, I would say. It was not in the previous list. Then we have security misconfigurations. Do we have that? Yes, we do have security misconfigurations in the previous top 10 category and in the latest one as well. Then we have improper inventory management, which is the new, and unsafe consumption of APIs. This one is one of the newest addition in the latest release of OWASP API security top 10 category. Okay, so for this demonstration, what we will gonna do? At first, we will gonna look at the 2019 category, and then later on we will proceed with 2023 category. Okay, so we will try to cover all of these vulnerabilities as much as possible, and I'm not gonna go into much detail because I believe majority of the people might have already aware about the basic API security vulnerabilities. Okay, so my main objective will be to focus entirely on the demonstration process. Okay, but before proceeding with this demonstration, let me quickly guide you with the installation of this vulnerable API, which is CR API, built by or created by OWASP itself. And this category provides us the top 10 OWASP vulnerabilities, and this include the 2019 vulnerability. I mean, the vulnerabilities which was released in 2019, all those vulnerabilities are available in this vulnerable application, but we will not be able to identify the latest one. Okay, so for the latest one, there are a couple of different vulnerable application which we will gonna look in our upcoming sessions. But first, let me guide you with the installation. So OWASP has already given us the installation procedure over here. Okay, so OWASP has these two mechanism. OWASP has introduced these two mechanism which we can use to build our this vulnerable application. And these two techniques are the number one, using pre-built image, or the number second, what we can do, we can manually clone this repository and we can manually install, not install, but we can manually build the container, and then we will have to start the Docker container. Okay, so these were the two techniques. And now when we talk about pre-built images, so OWASP has given us couple of different options in order to deploy and run the this particular type of vulnerable application. So if I go ahead and click on this deploy button, I will see that I can use pre-built Docker images to deploy this vulnerable app. We can also use Helm chart to deploy this application. We can also use Kubernetes, as well as we can also use Vagrant. I mean, in order to uh, use all these different deployment mechanism, we first need to have them installed in our own system in which we are planning to install this application. Suppose I am using Docker, or suppose I want to install this application via Docker, then I will have to definitely use the Docker. I mean, definitely I'll have to first install the Docker, then I'll have to use the Docker to deploy the machine. Same goes for Helm, same goes for Kubernetes, same goes for Vagrant. But the condition with Vagrant is that I would need a virtual box installed in my operating system, because Vagrant directly interact with VirtualBox. Okay, I'm not gonna go ahead with all these deployment phases. I will simply gonna use the pre-built Docker images. So what we have to do, we have to simply follow certain procedures, certain commands. So if you are using a Linux machine to set up this environment, set up this vulnerable application, we will have to follow this. And if you are using a Windows machine, you will have to follow this. And the same Linux command can also be executed on a macOS based machine, which currently I am using. Okay, so what I did, I have already downloaded this Docker Compose YAML file. Let me show it to you. I have already downloaded this. This is the YAML file. I'm not gonna go dig deeper into the content of this YAML file. I'm simply gonna close this, and then later on, in order to build the container on the basis of this YAML file, we will have to execute the docker compose pull command, which I have already did it, because once the execution of this docker compose pull command completes, we will get different set of docker images uh, installed in our machine. So if I go ahead and enter this docker images command, I will be able to see that there are a couple of different containers, not containers, different images which got installed in my machine. Okay, after this, after the execution of this syntax, what we will have to do in order to up the container, I mean in order to run the vulnerable application, what we have to do, we have to now execute this syntax. So what this syntax will gonna do, this syntax will gonna run all the machines which are mentioned in our YAML file, and it will first check that whether those machines are installed or not, and if it is installed, it will gonna run the container in the detached mode. So I'm gonna go ahead and enter this syntax, and within a couple of seconds our vulnerable application will be ready to use. So if we can see over here, currently these four machines are in the running state, and then later on all the machines will gonna go live, not live, but they will be available to use in the local environment. So let's wait and wait and wait. It will gonna take a couple of more seconds. Instead of me saying couple of more seconds, I would say it will take couple of minutes, and then the status of all the images will gonna be running instead of exit. I'm gonna pause the video for a minute. Okay, so now all the containers are up and running, and if I simply scroll towards my right, I can see that I will be able to access this web portal on port number 8443, and I will be able to access this mailhog server, mailhog application on port number 8025. Let's calculate it. Let's re-verify them. So how we will gonna verify it? We can simply perform a map scan on our local machine because the containers are running in a local environment, and this is how I'm gonna scan my environment. And yes, port number 8025 is open, port number 8080 is also open, and port number 8443 and 888. These are some of the well-known port number which application uses. So let's verify them. So I'm gonna go ahead and start the Burbsuits browser. Let's wait. I'm gonna turn off the interceptor for now, and localhost port number 8080. Let's see what it has. Okay, we can ignore port number 8080, I guess, and 8025. Yes, so that is our mailhog server. Let me delete everything for the moment. And yes, one more thing. I have already performed some action on this application. That's why I was getting couple of emails on my mailhog. But if you are the one-time user, not one time, but if you have installed it once, or you are the first time user, then you will not gonna see any sort of detail over here. Okay, then next, let's see what's there on port number 8443. And this port number has the application running. Yes, let me log out. I have already created a user, and there is one more port number, double eight and double eight. And yes, so there is one difference. The difference is that the application which is running on port number 8443 is having a SSL certificate. Although the SSL certificate is not valid entirely, but the application which is running on 8443 does supports SSL certificate, because if I go ahead and remove the S from HTTP schema, it will give me plain HTTP request was sent to HTTPS port. That means HTTPS has been utilized over here. So I'll have to use this. And the application which is running on port number 8888 doesn't have any sort of HTTPS at all. So if I go ahead and enter HTTPS over here, I will get a message which says unsupported or unrecognized SSL message. Okay, so we will have to use the application present on port number 8888 without HTTPS, and this one with HTTPS. Okay,